Just a second. Okay, so to dive into the episode, what it is that I want to speak about is this idea of collective spirits, and in some sense, how they select individuals. But even though in the title I've written collective spirits that ran with individual stories, I am fascinated by not just decisions that individualized intelligence makes, but decisions that potentially collective intelligence makes. There are many narratives, pretty much the human being, upon being born, puts the world into a story. He makes himself the main character, and then there is, in some sense, side characters. But there are moments where, in the story of reality, as if reality is like this, you know what it is? It's as if like reality is the outside world, and every person's view or understanding or inner realm is the house they're in right now. If I have specific beliefs on the outer realms, I will in some sense be limited. I would be in some sense in my own box first, then trying to wonder about the great box which we're all contained in, right? There is a narrative a hobby of mine is that I'm fascinated by stories, and I look for them. I look for important moments in stories and in circumstances of ideological, you can say, identity. So, I remember watching this show, this comic book made into an anime with the title of Black Clover. I think that was the name of the show. Now, there was something I observed in this show that was very profound, and you could totally see how the creators of the show were inspired by ancient ideas to develop the content, right? And so, there are characters in this show that are selected by forces that are supernatural or beyond the individualism of nature, right? Beyond the individual humanized identity. And so, for example, there was a character in this storyline. It was, of course, a fictional universe where magic was like common day, but in that fictional universe, there was a character, I forget his name, Yuno. I think his name was Yuno. And this character was selected, was chosen by the wind spirit, as if they were different elements, wind, fire, water, and earth. You know, this specific person was chosen by the air element, by the spirit of the wind, right? And there was another character in the show who was selected by the spirit of fire. And how they are selected is by their individualism being observed, right? We treat the world excuse me. We treat the world as if it has no greater decision maker, right? I mean, some people do. There are religious people who treat it like that, but I will tell you, it is as if the gods in ancient Vedanta, in Vedic thought, which is a polytheistic tradition, in Vedic thought, there is a sort of dissolution of individual identity into a collective force. It wasn't only that, it's as if after you have lived a life where you have understood how your intelligence as a human organism there's a quote from Einstein in the subtitle, which I should, not the subtitle, but in the description of the video, which I should probably read. There's this quote ascribed to Albert Einstein. He says, "A human being is a part of the whole called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feeling as something separate from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion, to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty." So Einstein was so conscious, if this quote is really ascribed to him, that in some sense he had noticed the linguistic simulation, but he hadn't broken it, which is in some sense a testament to the patience, right? That means I kind of feel that my birth is at a time where a species is starting to understand that its mind's life is speeding up more than its body's life. And that idea I wanted to share from ancient Vedic thought was that pretty much we are the game of the gods, and what that means is it's as if like we are being watched by superior positions of intelligence in this universal sector. Now there are, and if we were to say, let's say the gods from, like whether in ancient Greek mythology or ancient Vedic mythology, you know, the gods are like watching man, right? And I feel that it's just like here's a better analogy, like Hunger Games, how there were sponsors. I feel that there is invisible sponsorship and for this planet in regards to human activity being close to being new. So what I mean is that imagine something that's never happened on this earth, and this earth is being watched by greater eyes in the sky. So these greater eyes will look at human activity, will look at the human principles of motion, right? And what I mean by that is like how we animate into behavioral psychology. And so the sponsorship is in some sense an allegiance with universal force. So just like how in that fictional narrative Black Clover, the wind spirit of the time of that era had chosen a specific warrior to bestow its ability on. I also feel that in our modern age, the universal theater that we find ourselves in, it has directors, but these directors are not ideological, but man can establish an ideological relationship. What that means is a person, if you look at pet owners, for example, you can say a person owns a pet, and then you notice usually pet owners to try to humanize the animal, right? They speak to the animal as if it's a person, you know? So similarly, we can say that when it comes to collective spiritualism, or when it comes to collective forces that have access to consciousness, in some sense it will say just like how we treat the dog like a human, greater intelligence forces treat human beings like greater intelligent forces. And not in the sense that we are kind of like shackled by the will of the gods, but in some sense I am saying we are being watched by universal intelligence of some kind. I mean, every person is the watcher of their own existence from the beginning of the time they're born till the end, really. You know, every person's own, who is embodied right now in human form. You are on an elemental roller coaster. So, pretty much in this episode, I am just fascinated by how the divine will establishes a relationship with the individual will. The individual is an individual to itself, if you notice, right? People change all the time, but they change not because the person is changing only, they change because the world is changing. It's as if person A and B have a conversation in one day, then tomorrow when they have a conversation, there has been different factors that have activated in the consciousness of the individual. Or for me personally, for example, when I give these talks, there has to be an activation point. There has to be something that I notice that surprises me enough to pull the string of the idea to see where it leads, right? For example, for this episode, it is collective, spiritism, a sort of collective relationship of the individual. That is the most fascinating thing, because what can we do? We have three options on this planet. Either from our individual position, we become nothing, or we in some sense become everything. These are the two options, and then there's one more where it's like whether we are nothing or we are infinite, we are ever continuing into this. That means sometimes when I look at people, judge other people, where they say this person's good, that person's bad, this person's likable, this person's unlikable. All these factors are just it's as if we ascribed emotions to the periodic table, then we forgot of an elemental void, and so really it's as if what else could be moving in emptiness, of course it will ultimately come to divine conclusion, just like how back in the day people saw, people didn't know what the wind was. You could totally see somebody was walking and a giant, let's say a strong wind hits them, and when that strong wind hits them, imagine their friend being yo man, the gods are pushing you around, and so it becomes something where a force of an inanimate nature, just by having a relationship with an individual, became a collective subject. Man has kept the gods alive behind his eyes before he can even seek to see if they are in front of his eyes. Right? The way the mind works is that it is being the context to the existence. So, to continue, I personally find intelligent rhythms here. Intelligence of a collective nature. My relationship with that intelligence of a collective nature is not personified, and this is where I think from the whole spiritual communities on this planet I have a different reception, simply because I don't conclude personality to be the ultimate. I am that person who, if somebody asks, do you believe in a soul, Mr.Within? I would say yes. And if they ask, does your soul have content? Does it have a shape? I would say no. Right? I follow the school of thought where the soul is not a person, the soul is just how the universe is happening to itself in a fragmented awareness. That means we think we are individuals, and that is the most adorable thing that's happening. In the void, it's like as if the gods and the emptiness of the universe saw the human being trying to get to the next day, and they're like, oh my god, look at this kid trying to step out of the box. There is a great love here that beyond thought protects movements are. And I'm not trying to be religious about this, I'm just trying to say that there are certain movements in this realm authorized, certain movements unauthorized. Just like a soccer game, you cannot hold the ball with your hands, right? And so similarly, you have to kick the ball with your feet. So you could say it's as if we have to be compassionate on this earth because the unkind get dismissed early. And not in the sense of like the righteous not being rewarded before the cruel, but in some the concept of the good and bad having different karmic delays, different karmic echoes. That means some people say, why is it that like the corrupt, evil, lying people on this planet are succeeding, Why aren't the righteous, finding their right way, for example? And I would say, from another perspective, it would really be that the unrighteous are getting their karma sooner than, the righteous. And what that means is those who are in alignment with the winds of evolution or the collective intelligence of nature, they don't have karma. That means even if they do, it is just a quickly for the system to clear out whatever is there. That means it's like I don't know, guys. I feel there is a greater intelligence in this world. I feel that our personalities are a tiny percentage of what is going on here. I feel that when the human being establishes a relationship beyond personality with the present living intelligence of nature, the human being finds itself, in some sense, like a bhakti yogi running alongside the spirits of this realm. What that means is, imagine there is a great war taking place in this world. Just imagine, this is hypothetical, but imagine a great multidimensional war is taking place. Now human beings are in there. We are like, it's as if the village is under attack, but we are stuck in the roof, like one of the houses in the village, not realizing that, empires are at war. And when it comes to the multidimensional, it is just boundary jurisdiction. That means sometimes when I read stories in ancient texts, in the sense of gods fighting titans, it kind of disturbs me because I'm like, oh my god, even the gods are territorial. Because the human animal is territory based. That means like the wolf doesn't have a concept of ownership or owning a land or a permit or something like that. The wolf just, excuse my language, but the wolf just places its territory. It deals with territory just to create its safe space for its work, as if every organism is a set of instructions of how it needs to happen in the world. Internal biological kind of, imagine IKEA manual. The human being is being first, then it is human. So what that means is that intelligence is unconditionally here. We call that in the secular framework energy, or being conscious of energy. Now, in regards to sense of how ideological you need to be. So, for example, there are some people who believe they're talking to the gods, and there are some people who are just like an antenna in the moment, and whatever arises to them, they articulate it from a humanized perspective, but not devoid that there is dehumanized content here in the world, right? So it's our filtration and it's our ability to step out of the walls of our personal universe to notice the impersonal universe. And the greatest victory of human being is not to get what you want, is to get what the species wants, what the species needs. You know, it's as if imagine all individuals climb the Maslow's hierarchy of sociological needs. You know, the person sustain their physiological needs. That means they physiologically are surviving. Then they psychologically survive, and eventually, when you get to self-actualization at the peak of Maslow's hierarchy, you begin to see it's the edge of another triangle. This is my personal theory that Maslow's hierarchy is there is an inverted triangle connected to that triangle. That means when you actualize and self-actualize in the outer realm, you actually become your whole inner realm. And when you self-actualize in the inner realm, you become your whole outer realm. So what I mean by that is that the moment you successfully reach the pentacle, or the epitome, the peak of the mountain of your human life, you will notice a sky where the only entrance to that sky is through wings. And if I was to translate this from Mysticalese to English, I would say that once you have lived as a person and you have experienced the persona, you will notice it as a mask. What is behind this mask is a dualistic universe, which means a confrontation of the shadow. And alongside duality, there is also symmetry, where I would say from the Jungian perspective, when you try to understand the symmetry of nature, you are confronting the animus, you're confronting the balanced perception of your ideological existence. What that means is the animus framework for Jungian thought is like if you've never had sisters, right, is to imagine like what your sister would look like. Or if you've never had brothers, it is to imagine what your brother would look like. That is a sort of, I would say, subtle confrontation of the animus, but ultimately it's the recognition that even though in the outer realms we are man, we are woman, but in the inner realms what we are is presence, is awareness, and the mind has no gender, which is the strangest thing, where I'm just looking back and I'm like, oh my god, how is human history going to come to the moment where it recognizes space has no form? When we realize space has no form, it means in some sense the mind has no shape, but it is the one where it is shaping, right? So it's like discovering the dynamism of your own eyes as an interconnected part of the universe. some sense your ego disappears in an instant, and there is that aftermath of watching the moment without anything to connect it to. So that's the true unknown. So when I realized that the unknown is here, it made me kind of be like, why is the content of my mind being filled by the past when there is so much future to be lived? After 2011, there was a sort of pattern I went through. First, I started to write. I remember I was raking leaves in my backyard, and it was like midday, the sky was white. And as I was raking leaves for the first time, I began hearing it more in poetry than was imagined raking leaves. Trying to survive in York University, and so I had something, an inefficient thing had happened, something bad, not bad, but something unfortunate, unnecessarily unfortunate had happened, and so I was standing York University in Canada. It's like this, it has this giant space outside of it, and there's a fountain, and I remember, and there's these benches without a backrest, there beside the fountain, and I remember I sat there, and automatically I had my fingertips of my right hand touching the fingertips of my left hand, and I was looking at the water in the fountain, and just for a second wondering, like, what am I doing with my life? Like one of those moments. And in that moment, I noticed something, that every time I would exhale, I would hear language in my inner nose. It was for the first time I had noticed a thought stream. It was as if thoughts were moving in my mind, but I had noticed that they were faster than how I normally think. So can you imagine you sitting somewhere, just pondering, just looking at a fountain, and suddenly your thoughts begin moving at a speed where you normally don't think at that speed, right? So I started to notice in my inner realms the movements of an internal river of objects, and that means an internal cinematic language that was faster than the one I was accompanied to animating on my own, right? So I remember being beside that fountain, and there was literally like what I felt was like it felt to me like 10 minutes, but it had been like 30 minutes of me just sitting there and hearing their conversation in my inner realms, right? And in So anyways, I remember writing like, I think it was 10, 12 technical works, and then like throughout the years like 20 poetry works. So what that means is like the first wave was me becoming aware that I have no idea, so first phase I would say of my life, I stepped out of my conditioning. Second phase of my life, I realized second phase of my inner life, I realized I'm an antenna. Third phase of my life, I started consciously using the antenna. Fourth phase of my life, I eventually got to a point where I can automate my mind. What that means is I could probably go at the edge of my consciousness to a point where I would, how would I tell you, where I'm about to fall asleep and still be able to command the body to communicate, because it's a force. We think we're people, we're actually forces in nature. So I went through a phase of my mind communicating on its own from whatever it had seen so far in this life, as if the mind had something to say to itself, not to others at first, right? So people won't realize how much content I have communicated before even recording the talks, before even sharing these talks alongside even talks being pulled into the intelligent currents they're literally like we're fish in an ocean, and when a fish goes into the current from one side of the ocean at a very fast speed, it is taken to the other side. So currents are highways for fish in the ocean, and for the human being there is an intelligent highway, as if rivers of consciousness everywhere. So a fish goes into a current The fish is like, oh my god, am I swimming this fast? No, it is the current. You know, a human being gives a podcast and he wonders, am I communicating this fast? No, it is the current. I am literally surfing as my whole moment, all the content that is found in it to some degree. What else can intelligence do? It has to ride along in this universe, ride alongside it. That means imagine the living earth, any life you see, whether it's in an insect or whether it's in an animal or whether if it's in the gods, in the archetype of a god, right? Whatever life you see, there is a value to it, or I would say it is the divinity of the animate potential. That means anything that has animate potential shouldn't be disturbed, really, right? That means we are eating a lot of animals, you know, but at the same time, there is also this view that nature works best when it is not disturbed, you know. There was a man named Sadhguru. He's a mystic, well-known mystic, you know. And he has a daughter, and his daughter, he was sharing how he raised his daughter. He was like a conscious yogi, a conscious mystic, and so how he raised his daughter was he had this ashram, and imagine the daughter being born in an ashram, and the first thing that Sadhguru says to everyone in the ashram is nobody is allowed to teach his daughter. Right? That means his daughter went in the ashram talking to people, but no one would actually say anything, even though I think it's highly unlikely that happened that smoothly. But like, but what it is like Sadhguru, this man of incredible insight, had realized that sometimes nature needs to develop simply, then be introduced to complexity. This is why it hurts the whole soul of the solar justice of this realm when the youth are in some sense go through suffering. You know, the youth, because in some sense the tree has to grow, then its fruitful work arises, right? But we have built a civilization where the tree, it's like you put the seed in the soil and the seed already wants to have its fruit. You know, that was like the whole thing with millennials. You know, that it was as if a generation of people had entered the world that wanted things to instantly be satisfactory. But back in the day, they were so patient that when something happened, it was like they were grateful for it. They weren't ungrateful because things were slow. They were grateful because they happened anyways. I corrected the audio. Hopefully it's better now. Okay, hopefully the sound as well. You know what? I'll just turn off the music just in case. People can select music if they want in the background. Okay. So, dear viewers, dear human beings, fellow species members, there are intelligent currents, and we are a rhythmic animal. That means consciousness is a rhythm, and it's strange because the brain is a muscle. Sometimes I feel it's like when you work a muscle, you know, even though its fibers tear and new, a sort of new fiber, muscle fiber kind of, like, you know, the brain expands, but at the same time it's like the muscle if it is kept in one state, it goes into a paralysis, right? That means the poet Rumi says, if you look at if you make your hand into a fist and just intense fist and you keep it there, your hand goes paralyzed after a while, like just goes into a temporary paralysis. The muscle experiences fatigue, and if you completely keep your hand open and stretched, it will experience fatigue. And so what it means is that the body is not trying to be perfect or imperfect, but it's trying to be balanced enough to be able to survive and continue, right? So when it comes to man's relationship with the creativity of the mind, like we're saying we have minds, but we don't know what the mind is, like that's a big deal in civilization, you know? So by trying to find one's simplest state, one will access their true nature. Once you access your true nature, you get acquainted with the rhythm of your perception, just like how for writers, excuse me, just like for writers, like an advice to writers, they tell writers that in some sense, that in order to find your writer's voice, you have to write a lot. You just have to write a lot. You know, you have to attempt endless new moments of something. As if they say 10,000 hours to master. You need 10,000 hours of practice and training to master something, right? So now imagine we recognize from the beginning of our life, it has definitely been more than 10,000 hours of existence. Let's say you're not that young listening to my talk. So if you're a person who has existed more than 10,000 hours, and if those 10,000 hours are of conscious existence, one becomes a master of their acknowledgement, of the acknowledgement of their existence, right? There are obviously forces beyond our control, you know. I sometimes see in Western culture, you know, and when it comes to social life, like, there's a lot of people in the world who they feel their hearts have been broken, and they feel that when their heart breaks, that's the end of the world, you know. But I will tell you that, imagine like an existential heartbreak. Imagine a philosopher who in some sense had an ability to recognize that the world is here and reality can happen, and then reality not happening, that becomes an existential heartbreak. And it's as if our species is in the room, the soldiers are on the battlefield, but the soldiers don't see the battlefield, right? And the battlefield is an infinite landscape of decision making. You know, a person can make a decision that destroys their life, and they can make a decision that creates their life. You know, that's the fascinating world we live in. It's a masterpiece of perception. If we master peace, if we cultivate a state of mind that does not want to take, but for the first time wants to give to the world, because you're here for a little while, whoever you are listening to me, if we're all here for a little while, the greatest strategy is to share something that only our eyes could see that the world deserved to as well. You know, right now the species is afraid of loneliness, afraid of solitude, afraid of non-existence. This will change. Why? Because the multidimensional will be realized, and the moment it is, it will be a renaissance in global human behaviorism. That means all human behavior is reacting to a context of information. We open our eyes, we see a world, and we're like, that's what's up. Like the world is in front of us. But now, the meaning of the world is not in front of you, it is actually behind your eyes. Isn't that incredible? The world is in front of our eyes, but the meaning of it is behind our eyes, and it is being simulated from there. Right? So what it is like, rather than a person having the belief, it's like a biological animal is spherically simulating context to the universe through every inhale and exhale. It is impossible to comprehend the world without acknowledging that it is one giant event, right? That means something we don't realize, something every living being has in common is form, being conscious of the change of form. That is eternity. When we realize energy, because it cannot be created or destroyed, if consciousness was energy, we cannot die. So life and death is an additional simulation for our eternal joy. That means it's like not fearing the emptiness, because you realize it is the home of the Supreme. Emptiness is like just a humanized veil. Beyond emptiness, there is living reality. That means it's like, what's hilarious? Imagine all the other dimensions of possible existence. They would all have advanced civilizations, and only we're the ones that left out. We are the kid. We are the uncool kid. In the galactic classroom. And the moment we can advance our civilization, reach the caliber of being considered a galactic agent, right? And when I say a galactic agent, I'm not talking about, a sort of Hollywood approach to this. I'm saying that the relationship with galactic intelligence means man is becoming more considerate of his galactic position. From the beginning of my life, and from the beginning of every human being's life, you were a universal being. From the beginning. It's just that we are conditioned into our individualism to forget it. So, there is collective intelligence here, and it's like the fish that goes into the current under the ocean, let's say. In the ocean, right? Let's say a fish goes into a fast current. That fish can choose to call the current logos, can choose to call the current divine, can choose to be super secular about it, and just identified. We have the concept of UFO, unidentified flying objects, and we should have a concept of UEP, unidentified existential phenomena. continue. There's unidentified, even existential intelligence. That's maybe a better way to say it. UEI. So moments where the unknown is having a relationship with our direct experience. So every human being will experience this, whether it's communicating with visible phenomenology or invisible numenology. Inner realm stuff, right? So there's stuff in our outer realms, stuff in our inner realms. The stuff in our inner realms are like memories of events. They're recordings of a film-like nature, so there's a cinematic language going on behind our eyes. But this cinematic language, when it mixes with the unknown, without trust, nothing can activate. Let's say there's a nail in a wall, and you go find the hammer. And you have the hammer, and all you gotta do is use the hammer to hit the nail on the head. And what happens is that you have to trust in the strength of your hand holding the hammer. And even before hitting the hammer, simulate how you would hit the hammer to make your grip, still kind of like how people would use a samurai sword. That means the samurai in their inner realms had done the sword slash before the sword actually slashed like the object. So similarly, in our inner realms, there has to be a trust in whatever we are seeing in order for reality to have a depth that is accessible. 4.5 billion years went by, and something evolutionarily considered on a bacterial level, that means it's like there has been apocalyptic events on the planet in regards to meteor strikes, but yet some intelligence has managed to be maintained. Look at how fascinating this world is, that it's as if when people die on a bacterial level, intelligence will be there. This is why till the end of time there will be life forms emerging on this planet, unless the whole planet implodes or is vanished out of existence, Life is something way more important than any of our individualistic beliefs. It is something that deserves the highest honor, the greatest vision of your life. It's as if, like, sometimes when I'm alive, when I experience the conscious waking state, I'm like, the only thing we can do here is to give. Because we are a traveler, a story I share in these talks is the story of this merchant back in the day in the East, and he goes to this village. This is imagine, like, I don't know, ancient Iran, or just in the eastern, I don't know where exactly, but there was this caravan. Maybe it's not Iran, but it's like it was somewhere in the east, right? And let's say in the Middle East, where there was the story that this merchant, they were villages, right? There were towns, pretty much tribes that had built infrastructure and became towns. So back in the day, this merchant with his caravan of, his horses or camels or whatever carrying stuff, he goes to this town, and when he goes to this town, all the people are super happy because no one visits the town, and journeys were long and hard, to make. So this merchant is like, he's pretty much taking his store to different towns, rather than having a store in one town. Right, so this merchant goes to this town, and he calls the people in the town, and they all gather, and everybody gets what they want from the merchant, and the merchant does, ethical business, and there's one person who doesn't have money, right? Well, didn't have the privilege of having money, right? And he has, I don't know, this is like a little supply of something, and he's like, hey man, I got this. I want to trade it for an object I want to buy from you, right? And this merchant knows how hard life is, right? So he, in some sense, it just gifts the person who didn't have enough, let's say bartering funds, you know, he just gives him the product. He helps out another human being, and that human being, he doesn't pay with currency. He says, hey man, you've done kindness to me, let me share the kindness back. There is an enlightened person in this town, right? And back in the day, in the Sufi tradition, when someone was enlightened, they would say that person has the pearl, as if the world is like the oyster and the pearl is the truth, right? That means that person has access to the truth of the dimension, right? So this merchant's like, oh my god, an enlightened Sufi's here, thanks for telling me, that's better than any payment, and so he goes. And back in the day, it wasn't like the information era we're experiencing now. Information was invisible, in the invisible, right? People on this planet never knew that there would come a day where an individual human could have access to the internet and to all this information. It's completely a new age. But anyways, this merchant, after conducting his business, he, in some sense, it's like the end of the day, and he's like, let me go see this enlightened, wise man, right? And he goes and he sees it's the house at the end of the village, and it is a house where, I don't want to say like, Shrek is interested in real estate, but but I would say it's like this house that is like, it's not the best looking house, and the door is made of wood and whatever, in a sense of not well for it's just a simple house, okay, very simple minimalistic house, right? And so the merchant knocks on the door opens, and there's this Sufi who was in the middle of prayer, and the Sufi, in some sense, it's like his prayer is finished, and he comes and opens the door, and he invites the merchant in. Back in the day, hospitality was divinity, but now it's forgotten. Now the art of hospitality is being lost in the greed of a world that thinks it's okay to be cruel and to ignore, right? Because I'm telling you, this universe is like a biological body where if some part of it gets infected with evil, it literally, the white blood cells appear. It's just automated. It's just automated in the sense that the system is trying to balance itself, and anything that pushes itself off balance, the whole system tries to be in balance again. The whole system, that means it's like we're in the jurisdiction of universal law, not just humanized appreciation of the unknown forces of nature. So anyways, the merchant goes inside, the Sufi welcomes him in for tea, and they sit down on the ground, there's like these mats, right? And so the merchant is shocked, because the merchant is living a life where it's like, I'm alive once, let's go experience abundance, right? But the Sufi is living like a ridiculous minimalist, and the Sufi's there pouring tea into like cups, right? And the merchant looks at the house and sees this guy only has a lamp, he only has like a bed mat, and he only has like a kettle and like these smaller mats where they're sitting on, right? That's all like this guy has, this Sufi mystic, this dervish has, right? They were called dervishes, the Sufis. And so what happens is that the merchant, to create small talk, he says, my friend, where's your furniture? It's like as a joke to kind of inspire abundance, inspire the mentality of abundance, right? So the merchant says, it's like, hey man, where's your furniture? And suddenly the Sufi, from having this friendly attitude, becomes intense and says, where's your furniture? So the merchant says, where's your furniture? And the Sufi intensely, says it back to him. And then the merchant for a moment is like, hey man, I'm a traveler here, I'm a merchant, right? I'm traveling, I don't have furniture, I don't need furniture, right? And so in that moment, the Sufi suddenly smiles and says, me too, I'm a traveler. And then they have this very profound conversation of, and the merchant realizes, holy shit, look at how this human being is functioning. This Sufi mystic is perceiving himself as, he's perceiving his consciousness as a traveler in the elemental realm, in the space-time continuum, right? And so it's as if you can choose how much to be attached to. You can say people can be attached to furniture, or you can say people can be attached to the body. You know what I mean? They can be attached to format, right? But where's the format? You know? I think upon the honest recognition that our attention is traveling the space-time continuum, and we free ourselves from the strictness of ideological truth and from the repetition of emotional truth, we will eventually find ourselves at the language threshold, and the unknown and the great project of the species begins. You know, that means there is no teaching. It's like the tribe's furthest eyes are just pointing at the next domain of exploration. The next great achievement of man is not outer. It's not like we build something and we're just great. It is how the attitudes shift towards a global efficiency, you know, where man is living alongside the forces of nature, and he's living alongside the intelligence of minds, and he's living alongside the soul of universes. Do you see, like there are giants here in this universal sector, but they are not animate in the sense that a man's mind can understand what he has never seen. Really, it's a new introduction. So we can say the process of understanding is the process of new self-extraction, right? That means nobody can be the same if they see something new, because that new information has to fit their worldview somehow, fit in their worldview. So it means it changes it, right? So we have never believed in anything. We have just updated our internal image-based or language-based projections of the realm. And really the realm is still a giant mystery. So Mr.Within is saying to all the advanced communicators and pilots of the future, you know, who will arrive on this planet, I will tell you that sometimes we are the decision of the world. Sometimes when karma goes forth, it's an elemental decision. That means I personally know how long I will be in this world is not just decided by me. It is also decided by how the world engages me. Because how I engage the world is limited to my mindset, and the way the mind is set is that it throws a story. You know, like there was this show I remember watching as a kid, like a very young kid, called Pokemon. This dude would throw like these spheres at these, you know, creatures, and they would just instantly go inside the sphere. I feel we're doing the same thing with language. Language is the Pokeball, ideology is the Pokeball, and we're hitting this Pokeball to certain moments where there is direct experiential phenomena that doesn't have to be anything. And so we are actually containing endlessly reality. So really we have free will to choose what kind of container we are, but we don't have the free will to choose what sort of information or waves of nature's behavior like it contacts us, right? So what I'm saying is, rather than people trying to contact gods, or in the New Age community trying to channel aliens or whatever they're doing, you know, like instead of that, we should just try to polish the antenna. That is it. I am telling people, be simple and you will witness all complexity. And I'm not kidding. That's how nature is designed. The simple is the stargate to the complex. The complex is the stargate to the simple, meaning any complex problem can have a simpler fractal view. And then if you can fractalize into the geometry of the design of whatever you're looking at, you can see its interconnectedness. When you see its interconnectedness, at some point, the intelligent human being who's looking at history and all the knowledge of the species will in some sense be like, okay, At what point does non-fiction become fiction? Right? And that is the challenge of the species. That's why we have concepts where people, we say people are like, sometimes when I see someone, if the person doesn't see the outer realms, they are lost in their inner realms. That means think as if there's no such thing as good or bad, or normal or crazy people. There's no such thing. There's just moments of biological awareness, where in these moments of biological awareness, how the person is, how an object is being a subject to itself, is either locked in its inner realm or outer realms. So a lot of people who have been deemed in this reality as, for example, not having balanced psychology, the only issue is the person has been convinced by their inner world more than their outer world. And I'm not saying that a person should choose sides, as if like, if you live as a mind, as if you're going to the dark side, or you live as a body, you're going to the dark side, or you live as a soul, you're going to the light side. So I'm just saying that it's like, at what point does the human being go, oh, am I generating reality? Right? And that generating reality has to imply in emptiness there came form, or has to imply that the empty piece of paper something was written on, and the story of humanity was born from emptiness ideologically. That means our personalities came from nothing. But about the existential universe, I don't know if I can say this. That means I appreciate the Big Bang Theory in the sense that it was one of the most genius perceptions, in the sense that we looked at background radiation through the Hubble telescope, and we recognized and we created an event-based timeline to the universe. That means it's like, how does a person know how the universe started? Right? Only based on the ability they have of how they have understood the concept of things starting in accordance to their lifetime. Right? Because there are some moments where I'm like, this concept of a beginning and ending could be two sides of the same coin, and there has never been people who have lived or died. There has just been two worlds: a world where the mind is eternal, and a world where matter is eternal, or if the Vedic terms being Purusha and Prakriti. And so there is selflessness is required also. So that's the key thing that that's why some people think like, I'm a very silly person, but to be honest, the silliness is just to balance out the inner realm identity. That means the more selfless I am, the more I can laugh at everything, through an appreciation of it rather than a depreciation. The world soul, its decision is the sum total conclusion of the forces of nature. And it's like the science teacher being like, oh my God, how do I teach kids the whole universe? And you see that it is only through the sharing and telling of stories that the psychology of the human, of the animal that considers itself human, is kept. Right? That means to be a human is a grand privilege, and to have human civility. Like, think about how ahead of its time. Like, we are doing something as a species on this rock that if all the animals could speak, they'll be like, what the fuck is the human being doing? Oh my God, they would freak out, right? Because we are engaged with, and as if like more than one dimension of realism, right? And to manage that is the great challenge of 8 billion creatures living on a rock in the middle of nowhere. I hope we have an educational system in the future where children go home and the parents are like, what's your homework, son? And the child looks at the parent and says, to figure out how we can solve world hunger, how we can solve the biggest complex challenges of the realm. Because that's what I realized When a person is young, they want to be older quicker. When a person's old, they want to be young. They want their youth to remain, so they want life to actually go slower. So when you're younger, you want life to speed up. When you're old, you want it to slow down. But in reality, it should be 24/7 sped up, and there should be in some. And let me tell you why. Because it can be. The system can be so advanced that there is no time for mistakes. Not that mistakes are not possible, but that there are so many backup systems to human intelligence that when one mistake occurs, there is like 1,000 more solutions ready to implement. And it's a ratio. When the species has more workable strategies than unworkable misery, it's just successes by nature. Right? Somebody once defined happiness as if you've gone on a long journey, and at some point in the journey you just look back, and in that instant, in that nanosecond, that's happiness. You found it. A contentment with how life has moved and will move and is before moving. Right now, in my inner realms, I feel like I should read quotes from this poet named Hafez. Hafez is a Sufi mystic, and anybody who knows a person from Persia, this is like a huge part of, you could say, Iranian metaphysics, as a sort of rebellious, poetic truth-holding. That means something strange that has happened in, for example, the country of Iran, which is a theocracy, is that there were some poets who realized that the nation is going to get captured by ideology, so these poets made the culture connect to the universe, right? And so they have a very important role. It's as if poets in society are the ones that have cared to look at society. Because if you don't care about it, you have no inspiration to share. That means if I didn't care about the world, if I was like it's all nothing, or it's all like one thing, it's like that instantly makes you be dehumanized, not even care to be an individual. So it is only through an honor that we are experiencing a phase. Very dualistic framework is going towards an infinity. We are here to experience infinity before we realize the void can never die. That means the mind is energy's endless, ever-present truth. Anyways, the poet Hafez says, "Stay close." And Hafez, just one more thing to say, this man was alive 700 years ago. And he's known as Hafez Shirazi, Hafez Shirazi. So he says, stay close to anything that makes you glad you are alive. Hafez says, I have learned so much from God that I can no longer call myself a Christian, a Hindu, a Muslim, a Buddhist, a Jew. The truth has shared so much of itself with me that I can no longer call myself a man, a woman, an angel, or even a pure soul. Love has befriended me so completely, it has turned to ash and freed me of every concept and image my mind has ever known. That is how you go beyond the language threshold, the Sufi path of love. That means really emotions are here to keep the mind from dying to itself before eternity is noticed. Sometimes I think our emotions are like mythological, entities. Like as if you saw a phoenix at night, in the sky, it's as if an emotion coming out of nowhere is the same. The poet Hafez says, I once asked a bird, how is it that you fly in this gravity of darkness? She responded, love lifts me. Hafez says, I wish I could show you the astonishing light of your being. Hafez says, your heart and my heart are very, very old friends. Hafiz says, be kind to your sleeping heart. Take it out into the vast fields of light and let it breathe. This quote is so important, guys. When Hafiz says, be kind to your sleeping heart, he says, he's pretty much saying, be patient with the evolution of the species. Do you know how much patience we need to have the future arrive? Literally 8 billion human beings have to see mistakes every day and be like, okay, I forgive the universe for making a mistake. Okay. And after endless mistakes have been forgiven, we realize instead of caring about judging the mistake, we just amplify the solution. Sometimes I feel like this is what enlightenment poetically is like. It's like a person suddenly noticing there's truth and then shouting in the moment, truth, where are you? Truth, the ultimate truth of this reality, of this dimension, of this world, where are you? Imagine the person shouting this, right? And then imagine truth is like, yo, I'm right here. You know, and the person's like, no way, you were right here the whole time. And truth is like, yeah, I was here the whole time. You know, and then there is like the union of the gods, you know what I mean? There's advanced evolution where we realize, you know, the world is changing, you know. That's why I feel so free to speak and be poetic. Why? Because everything changes, you know. You know, that means nobody has a critic when the critic is a changing being, you know. Hafiz says, your love should never be offered to the mouth of a stranger, only to someone who has the valor and daring to cut pieces of their soul off with a knife, then weave them into a blanket to protect you. You know what I think he means here? Hafiz is saying you must honor the true dimensions of reality when they appear. That's it. Hafiz says you yourself are your own obstacle. Rise above yourself, you know. Hafiz says it happens all the time in heaven, and someday it will begin to happen again on earth, you know. Hafiz says fear is the cheapest room in the house. I would like to see you living in better conditions. Hafiz says, how can I be more kind? Hafiz says, what we speak becomes the house we live in. Another version of this quote is, the words you speak become the house you live in. You know, that means the context you select becomes the concept's freedom. Hafiz says, I have 1,000 brilliant lies for the question, how are you? I have 1,000 brilliant lies for the question, what is God? If you think that the truth can be known from words, if you think that the sun and the ocean can pass through that tiny opening called the mouth, oh, someone should start laughing. Someone should start wildly laughing now. So what he means is, he's like, if you think language is reality, it's like, buddy, take your head out of the box, you know, and the whole species has to believe it. We have to free ourselves from the shackles of inner realm, you know, fixed views, pretty much. We gotta just loosen up in our psyche. That means it's like, imagine there's 3 now, imagine I'm Mr. Within is saying right now civilization has a solid mind, right? And those who have a sort of kind of gas state of a mind, they in some sense will suffer in a solid reality. So the solution is to go into the liquid state, which means we become multidimensional beings, which means it becomes impossible to judge anything. Information just appears as if your moment is the artwork, and you're living artwork right now. It's as if that's what the soul is doing, drawing, the dawn of time, the dawn of existence. Hafiz says this place where you are right now, God circled on a map for you. Hafiz says, I am in love with every church and mosque and temple and any kind of shrine, because I know it is there that people say the different names of the one God. Hafiz says, what do sad people have in common? It seems they have all built a shrine to the past and often go there and do a strange wail and worship. What is the beginning of happiness? It is to stop being so religious like that, which means you have to release the world from you before the world releases you from itself. You have to release yourself. That means it's as if people, the yogis, how do I get out of samsara? But it's as if we have held on to it. And when we let go for a moment of having to impinge ideological truth or emotional truth upon just the simplicity of how the moment is present, it's as if freedom is the songs of eternity are being played. It's just the ears. We have to find our inner ear. Our inner reception has to be updated. Hafiz says the stringed instrument that can only be tuned with love. Hafiz says the earth would die if the sun stopped kissing her. Hafiz says what happens. This is the name of the poem actually. The poem is called What Happens. Hafiz says what happens when your soul begins to awaken. Your eyes and your heart and the cells of your body, to the great journey of love. He doesn't say, I said. So I'll read it again. He says, what happens when your soul begins to awaken, your eyes and your heart and the cells of your body to the great journey of love? First, there is wonderful laughter, and probably precious tears, and 100 sweet promises, and those heroic vows no one can ever keep. But still, God is delighted and amused you once tried to be a saint. What happens when your soul begins to awake in this world to our deep need to love and serve the friend? Oh, the beloved will send you one of his wonderful wild companions like Hafiz. What this means is that the pilots are arriving. There will be so many human beings in the future that they will know what I am doing with these Mr. Within talks. Even though they would not have existed, that means it's as if I have an unborn audience, maybe, human beings that have not been born yet, but one day may subscribe to a YouTube channel. How epic is that idea? That means it's like the person has unborn subscribers, Anyways. Hafiz says there was a young child whose next door neighbor was an elderly gentleman who had recently lost his wife, this old man who had lost his wife. Upon seeing the old man cry, the little boy went into the old gentleman's yard, climbed onto his lap, and just sat there. When his mother asked what he had said to the neighbor, the little boy said, "Nothing, I just helped him cry." Even after, that's insane. The kid just went to, helped him cry. Hafiz says, even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, "You owe me." Look at what happens with a love like that. It lights the whole sky. What that means is psychological, the greatest psychological status is of an infinite intelligence giving to itself. What I mean is that be so advanced, whoever you are listening, that the moment is already there. I don't know how to say it. It's like sometimes the future is behind our eyes, and when we make a decision, we bring it into the world. Hafiz says, run, my dear, from anything that may not strengthen your precious budding wings. Run like hell, my dear, from anyone likely to put a sharp knife into the sacred, tender vision of your beautiful heart. Hafiz says, when all your desires are distilled, you will cast just 2 votes: to love more and be happy. That is the most advanced state of the mind. And how much animalism do we have to overcome as intelligent minds to get to that state in the outer world? Hafiz says, carry your heart through this world like a life-giving sun. It's like, yeah, that's how you should, definitely carry your heart, as if your eyes are divinity in motion. All of us. Hafiz says, join me in the pure atmosphere of gratitude for life. Hafiz says, for I have learned that every heart will get what it prays for the most. What it prays for most. Hafiz says, love sometimes wants to do us a great favor, hold us upside down and shake all the nonsense out. Hafiz says, poetry reveals that there is no empty space. As if there is, like when somebody speaks, there's a life moving that force, moving that intelligence. Life forms that are actually a life force conscious of itself. And Hafiz says, your separation from truth is the hardest work you will ever do. Hafiz says, what is the root of all these words? One thing, love. But a love so deep and sweet, it needed to express itself with scents, sounds, colors that never before existed. And Hafiz says, how do I listen to others? As if everyone were my master, speaking to me. His cherished last words. Their cherished last words. That means every moment the universe is being universally communicated. What I mean by that is that every moment, it's if the universe was a mind, everything that happens is like all the ideas that arise. Right? So we are the arrival and the arising of intelligence in a universal space. We are in the most unique position of life, like based on how. Let me just Google for a second how many species there are on Earth. Even though there's no way we can know the exact number because it's an impossible research project, but there's okay, so there's 8.7 million species. Oh, sorry, it says most precise estimate yet suggests more than 80% of species still undiscovered. So far it's like 8.7 million. First of all, that's an incredible achievement for our human beings. That's the suggestion of what we do when our minds unite. We discover 8.7 million species. But the thing is, like, out of these 8.7 million species, our eyes have opened in one that has great fingertip control, and at the same time, like, that is aware of the of existing. Like sometimes when I look at animals, I'm like, yeah, this animal has no clue it's being an animal right now. We are that rare animal in nature that noticed it's being an animal, which is a suggestion that it's like a world inside a world activated. It's as if it's like Earth is in heaven. Everything is happening in heaven right now, as if truth simulated the illusion until the illusion realized it was the simulation of the truth. The presence is, and the winds of evolution take our attention to where it needs to be. So, final comments before I end the episode. Collective spirits that ran with individual stories means human beings, upon righteously tuning to the greatest, not to the greatest, but to the most important events in nature, there will be collective spiritual contact, which means that it's pretty much teamwork with the world soul. But it is not ideological, it is experience driven. Direct experience is a greater teacher than any sound a creature can make. To be free, we have to realize where we already are, and then that archetype will find a way to bring freedom in the outer realms. That means your mind can fly way ahead of your body. Sometimes I feel, when I envision something, it's like my mind is like an eagle, and it has grabbed the shoulders of like a lion, a giant eagle grabbing the shoulders of a lion, and imagine both the eagle and the lion flying aiming towards the sun, a sort of on earth and off earth roar towards truth, as an entity, as a being. The journey of our eyes oscillates between individual and collective. This is just how reality is, individuals become collective, collectives break into individuality. You can say that we are all fragments of one truth, or we can say truth is fragmented. Right now in the outer realms we're saying truth is fragmented, but in the inner realms truth is in some sense a fragment of one event. That means there is an original Earth, and then there is 8 billion, based on how many people there are, how many human beings there are on Earth. There's 8.4 there's 8, not even 8, I don't think we're at 8 billion yet, but if maybe we are, I don't know, but there's 8 billion plus simulations of Earth, and all these 8 billion worldviews of human beings are trying to find the original Earth. So it's like this great challenge where the person's like, why did you go to school? And in an advanced civilization you would say, because the species was trying to find the original Earth. To remember causation unconditionally means the effect never existed. Truth never left the room. It's as if we are the imagination of a living universe. And now more than ever, the calling of the advanced communicators, the pilots, all those human beings who realize the importance of living as a compassionate universal mind. That is the great challenge ahead. The future is waiting, not only for our participation, but for our geometrical contribution. Every person's eyes is a journey. That journey has a value to an advanced civilization. So if we start living as if civilization is advanced, we may find a next level acceleration in actually building one. And there are many ways to walk, but to be true means that simplicity the simple dimensions of your intelligence and the complex of your complex dimensions of your intelligence are no longer at war. In the stillness and silence of the universe, the soul noticed its own role. You know, it's like a lion roaring in the space-time continuum. You hear yourself, yet you know the emptiness is there as well. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. And actually, before I end off, I wanted to say, I think every person just has to have the context of recognizing they are a conscious explorer, right? We're all like drones, you know, ultimately connected to the same vision of a species, right? And it's just exploration. I mean, what greater teaching can there be? There's the unknown, we're in the known. The known has to constantly establish its relationship with the unknown, and that's how it knows it is exploring. You know, life is a mystery, and we are conscious of it. That is the coolest thing that could have happened. You know, as if we have access to an inner heaven. Now we just have to build paradise on earth. You know?